Hey, everybody, welcome back to Two Girls Without Cancer. I am here with Miss Ashley.
Hello.
I am Becky. We are your hosts for the show.
Mhm.
Today, we are talking to someone named Parker, who is very interesting. We just got to know him
Mhm.
kind of backstage, hearing about his story. I think it's going to be very relevant to our audience and the people who listen to our show. He is a eating disorder specialist and a nutritionist, and we are branching out from cancer.
Mhm.
So if you're newer to the show and you think, well, that has nothing to do with cancer, well, you're right, and that's okay. That's what we wanted. We want to try something different in our
Mhm.
expertise,
But in a
right?
way it does, because you have to feel your body
Yeah.
so that you're healthy when
This
you're
is
going through
true.
it.
This is true. And you and I both know
Yeah.
like how nutrition,
Mhm.
especially with cancer, plays a huge role
Huge.
in it. Like if I just want to sit and eat McDonald's every single
Mhm.
day as a person going through cancer, well, I'm probably not going to be feeling great. I mean, if you're a regular healthy person eating McDonald's every day, you're probably not going to feel great. But
No.
certainly with cancer, you and I have both had to
Mhm.
look at our nutrition, our food intake, and see
Mhm.
like, what are we doing here? So
Mhm.
without further ado, let's bring Parker to the show.
Mhm.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
How
So-
are you?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm great.
We're Canadians. We're really
Yeah.
nice. Really
Yeah, it's good to see you guys.
Nice
yeah,
to see you.
really great to have you on the show. So, like I was saying, we're branching out. We're not just focusing on cancer, but yeah, when both Ashley and I were going through cancer, I mean, and even still now that we're both in remission, like nutrition still is a huge part of what's going on. There's a lot of darkness surrounding food. It's like for the longest time, even when I was sick, it was like, if I eat that, I'm going to die. Like if I eat that, cancer is going to get really bad, which is not healthy in its own right. And I almost think that you can create eating disorders in that, you know?
Oh yeah.
And not saying that I do have an eating disorder, although I have not a super healthy relationship with food. I am an emotional eater big time. And yeah, anyway.
I'm an emotional eater as well, but I do have a pretty good love for nutrition. I like to meal prep. I like to do all those things when I have energy to do it. I like making immunity boosting shots. So that's my area.
Yeah, Ashley loves meal prep, which not a lot of people love.
I know. I wish I could get more people to love it.
Right.
Well, Ashley is like poster child for meal prep. Even at her sickest, she'd be like, "Did you do like all these glass Tupperwares filled with like everything cut up?" And I'm like, "Girl, like I barely climbed out of bed today."
If I have one good day where I feel good, I'm going to do it, because the rest of the week I'm in bed. So I just want to make sure I'm set up for success, because I know it's important what goes into my body.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, it's great to hear.
So why don't you let everyone know like who you are, what you do, kind of thing?
Yeah, thanks. So I live in California, and I'm an eating disorder dietitian. So most of my time is spent in a residential care facility where patients come who are not stable to be on their own because of their eating disorder.
Wow.
And we give them care. So we give them 24-hour care. So we have therapists on site, we have nursing staff. I'm the dietitian who works there. So I'll help, meal plan, give them the right, food intake, give them education, work through. It feels like I'm a therapist sometimes because of the amount of like mental health work that I do with them. But, I give them nutrition tools so that when they're ready to leave, they can go to another program for support, but they can kind of go on their own from there. So I do that with most of my time. And then on the side, I do private practice as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. So off camera, we were talking about how his private practice is so different than working at the eating disorder clinic. It's almost opposite, because in private practice, people are probably coming because they want to lose weight, right? For the most part, majority of your clients.
Exactly. So you're right. It's almost opposite, because a lot of patients, not all of them, but a lot of patients coming to eating disorder facilities will have lost a lot of weight. And so we're trying to restore that so they can be physically and mentally healthy. And then a lot of the patients I see in my private practice are trying to lose weight. So they're going in different directions. And so the advice is really completely different. So it's like I was telling you, it's like for one group, no, it's okay, you can eat the peanut butter. And the other group, it's like, well, you might want to moderate your peanut butter a little bit.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How do you balance that world? Like, is it tough? Because you must get in your head, you're working majority of the time at the eating disorder clinic and
Right.
you're in your head one way. And then it's like,
Mhm.
oh no, I have to reset and like focus on these other clients who are completely different needs. Like, how do you balance that?
Mhm.
Yeah, luckily my days are different. So at least
Mhm.
I'm not like going back and forth every hour, which would be really hard.
Mhm.
But I will say that sometimes it's been difficult when I'm like making, handouts or resources where I'll like type something up and I'll almost be thinking to myself, wait, is this for which group is this for? So then I'm like writing down the wrong thing. And it's like, well, you really don't want to give either group the wrong advice because
No,
that's not helpful.
no.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're trying to put on all the weight. Okay, you're gonna eat only salads this week.
Yeah.
Just a lot of protein, a lot of
Mhm.
salad. No. Interesting.
Exactly.
So at the clinic, this intrigues me. Like, you're seeing majority of people who probably suffer anorexia, bulimia, things like that. What about the opposite, like binge eating? Do you see a lot of that?
We do. It's definitely less common because the facility we're in, it is 24-hour care. So the reason people are there is because they're not stable. So a lot of people
Mm.
who are binge eating, it's not like they're in critical care to where it's like, okay,
Mhm.
next step would be the hospital.
Well, they're not
Mhm.
starving
Mhm.
also, right? Like, it's not
Correct.
like they're gonna
Mhm.
waste away
Overeating.
anytime soon. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's that difference, but it is true that, eating disorders are very different in that way. So like binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder out
Mhm.
there. It's just not talked about as much and not
Mhm.
really as known as an eating disorder because it's
Right.
yeah, it's very different in like cultural perspective.
Mhm.
It's very mainstream. Like, you're American, we're
Mhm.
Canadian. Being overweight is fairly normal in this part of the world.
Mhm.
And let's include Mexico too, because you're close to Mexico.
Mhm.
These are fairly overweight countries, where it's like it's a pretty normal part of our life is
Mhm.
just being big. So it's like I feel like they wouldn't even associate that maybe a lot of what's causing
Mhm.
the obesity epidemic is actually a binge eating disorder. Is actually an eating disorder.
Right. And even without like perfectly looking at someone's size, like binge eating, because a lot of people who come into us, they might binge eat and they might purge. So they have kind of
Mm,
that like back and forth. So they might have both things going on.
right.
So there's kind of that range of like what people are dealing with. But to your point, yeah, like culturally, it can be normalized that a lot of people have binge eating
Mhm.
without knowing it.
Wow,
Interesting.
that is crazy. So then I have to know, like, you're at home, you have a family. Are you eating healthy 100% of the time? Like, do you allow yourself to go to McDonald's or, you just, better?
Yeah, I know. I get that question all the time because it's like, when people first hear what my profession is, they're like, "Oh, well, sorry I had the McDonald's around you," or like, "Sorry I have this, French
Yeah,
fries or
that seems
something."
right.
And not only because of the work I do, but just the approach I take, I try to make it normalize like, "Well, no, I don't advocate to get rid of these things." I don't
Mhm.
say like don't eat those at all because we grew up with it. It can be enjoyable, and to restrict it completely is actually where I see a lot of people get eating disorders
Right.
Mhm.
when they end up restricting so much that they don't know an appropriate way to moderate their
Right.
food.
Mhm.
So for
Yeah.
myself and my family, especially with, two young toddlers,
Mhm.
our approach is not to take away everything, but to say, this is really the right amount for you. And there's
Mhm.
lots of tools we can use to kind of figure that out. Hunger and
Mhm.
fullness cues, knowing what you've had during the day. But it's a tough approach to balance. And
Mhm.
like we mentioned earlier with binge eating, it's not an easy thing to know because it's not normalized what balance
Mhm.
and moderation look like.
Hmm.
Right. Well, I think that's great. Like
Interesting.
with
Yeah.
kids, like, we're
Mhm.
both moms,
Yeah.
teaching your kids the cues
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
a healthy relationship, because I'm sure it's the same for you
Mhm.
as well, like growing up. And even when I did it with my kids, like if they're crying, oh, here, have this. Oh, you're sad. Here, have this.
Emotional
Oh,
Right.
like, my kids come home upset about a boy. Let's go for ice cream, like stuff like that. So then you're being
You're putting
taught
those. Yeah.
that the way that you deal with a tough situation or stress is by eating some junk food.
Mhm.
So then when your life is going through a chaotic moment, you're
Mhm.
eating and eating and eating. And then finally, you wake up one day and you realize, like, I am severely overweight. I'm unhealthy.
Mhm.
And that's not, it's just because of something that was kind of just taught to us as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what you're saying is exactly what we're trying to get across to people who we see in our clinic, which is coping skills to deal with emotions and like the
Mhm.
difficulties of life is something that most people weren't taught or they weren't taught it well. And so
Yeah.
that's a lot of the work that we do, which is, oh, you're sad, you're bored, you're lonely, you have trauma, you have a lot of like
Mhm.
difficulty just accessing food. And then the response to that is, I'm going to control this one thing in a really, black and white extreme approach. But, what we're trying to teach them is you can use other tools to cope with
Mhm.
emotions and challenges
Mhm.
of life. And it doesn't always have to be food.
Mhm.
Dang, this should be
Makes
something
sense.
they teach in school,
They should.
honestly.
Mhm.
Totally.
Can you imagine like actual functional learning in school
Mhm.
of things that really hit
That
a
our
lot
kids
of
need.
people? A lot of people
Yeah.
deal with this. So I know my husband and his brother love my 600-pound life. TLC, guys. Like, just love it.
Mhm.
But you listen to, and I can't stand the show. I don't know. Anyway, but they watch it, and so it's on in the background, and every one of these people going through this struggle has like a really sad story.
Mhm.
Like, they've
Mhm.
gone through all kinds of trauma, and it's like, well, no wonder. Their eating is the only thing that they can control. And I know, like, I was quite overweight for a long time, and I had weight loss surgery like 10 years ago. But they don't teach you in that time. Like, yeah, you lose a bunch of weight really fast, but they
Mhm.
actually don't teach you why you were eating like that in the first place, how to deal with it. So like within a month of having weight loss surgery, I told my husband I wanted a divorce. And so all of the emotions that came with that, and I no longer could eat to satisfy myself
Mhm.
was really hard. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
how to deal
You
with
didn't
it.
know.
And then
Yeah.
as I could start eating more, as my stomach stretched out, I instantly went back to coping with food. Like, you guys have
Mhm.
Wendy's restaurant down there? I think you do.
Right.
I love
Yep.
Wendy's. And so
Yeah.
like when I was feeling like stressed out in my marriage or stressed out with like a boyfriend or whatever, my first thought was go to Wendy's.
Mhm.
And it got to the point when I was actually married and I would do this where like my heart would pound at the thought of Wendy's. And
Mm.
I would eat it and I would like almost calm
It's
me
like
down. It was like
addiction.
with drug.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
addiction.
It was like a drug
Mhm.
fix. And so, like weight loss surgery is great, whatever, for self-esteem, but like you really don't ever deal with the reason why you were
Mhm.
doing that in the
The
first
root
place.
cause of it.
Yeah. And so I
Mhm.
try to make better decisions now. Like, yeah, I like to go out to eat. I try to make better choices. Wendy's is not my first choice for sure. But it's like when I'm feeling emotional, my first thought is like, I should go eat something greasy and salty. And I don't know. I don't know what that trigger is
Mhm.
for me, but I don't love it. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
actually make me feel better. That's the thing too, is like,
You
don't
just
feel
have an
better
emotional
after you
connection
have
to
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I wonder, for people like you guys, like who have a healthy relationship with food, like how do you do it?
Oh, I still like to have a burger and fries. Like, I still do it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just know that on my regular, I have to eat this certain way. But I've been doing it also since I was like 22 and I'm 39 now. Like, I have
Mhm.
quite a years of experience. And then when I got sick, the one doctor had said to me, if I didn't live the life I did prior with the eating healthy and stuff, I wouldn't be here today. And I 100% believe
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Takes a lot of practice. And I mean, it's something that we do every day. So it's not like, you're kind of talking about like other addictions or dependencies where there's like drugs or, other fixations that we have. Food is different because we have to eat every day
Mhm.
and it's going to be
Yeah.
stuck with us for the rest of our life. So it's not non-negotiable. So it's not
Mhm.
like it's some drug where you can say, I'm just going to go cold turkey. I'm done with
Mhm.
this. I'm going to move on from it. You
Yeah.
can't remove it. You have to figure out how to deal with it better.
Mhm.
So it's really hard.
Yeah.
Balance of
It's
it.
not like you can have a healthy relationship with, I don't know, cocaine. Like,
Right.
Or even alcohol.
yeah, really.
Right.
But like you have to have a healthy relationship with food
Mhm.
and the things that you put into your body.
Mhm.
Otherwise you're going to get back into that. And
Mhm.
like full disclosure here, I had the weight loss surgery. I dropped 75 pounds. I've put 60 back on. Like, so,
Mhm.
without,
It's hard.
yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Without like knowing what
But
the
also
triggers are.
what you had gone through with the whole cancer journey, that also
Well.
isn't easy either, right? With all the other stuff that comes into it.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Like,
layers.
with what I got
Wow.
diagnosed with SIBO, I packed on 30 pounds, like real quick. And now I've been well, I'm starting to get a little bit better now with my stomach and stuff, but it's still hard, you know?
Dang. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, there's so
It's
many things. I mean, you're touching on it. It's like, how do you eat well when you have 800 things going on in your life and they're all physical or mental, right?
Yeah, I feel like with food, when I even in a situation like cancer where it's like I know I need to be eating properly, it's like it just feels like food is the one thing I can control in that I put it in my mouth and that's my decision to do so. But it's like the food that I'm choosing, like I feel like I don't have control over that. And like I do, I bought it. I'm choosing to put it in my mouth, but it's almost like it has such a control
over
over
you.
me that I don't have control of it. You know what I'm saying?
That
Like
makes
I know
sense.
like in my marriage when I was struggling with it, like going to Wendy's was me taking my power to
Your
go and
control.
being able to leave my house and go do those things. And yet it was like I had no control over like getting in that lineup and ordering. It was such a weird dynamic that I had with food. And I was like, hey, this is not healthy. This is
At
very
least you recognize.
I did, but I didn't stop it until I had weight
Mhm.
loss surgery. But again, like that's just really putting a band-aid on it and not actually getting to the root cause of like what was triggering that in the
Mhm.
first place.
So what you're describing is exactly what I talk about in my book, which is this idea that people kind of wrestle with of is obesity, is weight management, is nutrition as a whole, is it totally a choice? And I think a lot of
Mm,
people like to say, yes, it's 100% a choice. Or some
Mhm.
people say, no, like it's chosen for us because of our environment. But it's
right.
really, if we're honest with ourselves, it's both of those things.
I was gonna
You
say,
Mhm.
just
is it
described, yeah, you just described like you go somewhere and you feel like, well, I know I'm putting it in my mouth. Like I'm choosing that part of it. But how come I had such a hard time like keeping myself away from this restaurant?
Mhm.
Or how come the
Mhm.
things around me are almost choosing it for me? And there's so many
Right.
factors at play from like how our brains are wired differently,
Mhm.
from the environment we grow up in, from the places we live now and the things we deal with. It
Mhm.
informs our choices. So it's like it's both. It's our choice and it's really hard to deal with from an
Mhm.
outside perspective.
That's actually nice to hear that
Mhm.
it's both because yeah, I think we're really taught to believe that this is a black and white issue,
Mhm.
that there's very minimal gray area. You either are obese and you chose that, or you're healthy and you chose that. But like, it's not always the case. Now, what about when people say, like, obesity, for example, is a disease? Do you believe that?
So I think the collective understanding as like everyone from like scientists to people in general, I think our understanding has developed over the years. I think it used to be sort of that black and white of like you're just large or you're not large, like your body size. But
Mm-hmm.
now what we understand is just what I talked about, which is there's so many factors going on that lead to that that we can kind of look at it as sort of a disease state because it's
Mm-hmm.
like why are some people so drawn to food almost like it's an addiction or a
Yeah.
dependence?
Mhm.
And it's a lot of because it's like you have these genetics where your brain is wired in a certain way that combined with a really tough environment where food is like always in our face, food is always really like ultra processed. When you take those things and put them together, it's kind of like a disease state. So it's this chronic long-term
Mm-hmm.
thing that you have to deal with. And so you never really just like the things you guys have been through, it's never really like you're done with it, but you're always sort of working on it and you're always sort of
Mhm.
like getting better on it and improving with it. So I think that way we can kind of look at it as like a chronic disease in that way, instead of like the black and white, you're just this or you're not this.
Mhm.
That is very
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
I never thought of it like that perspective at all because I was always the person that was like, no, obesity is not a disease. You've chosen this. But
Right.
like as I struggle to lose weight and I'm like, okay, like maybe I'm a little powerless to it, not
Mhm.
entirely because I do believe I'm a human who makes choices and I
Mhm.
can make choices. But I also
But
think like I don't know, like maybe let's just go back a little bit. Like I said this to my husband recently. why is all of our food in North America garbage? Like all I want to do is just eat and it not kill me. Like
Yeah.
that's what I want.
Pesticides and all that.
And then I'm like, it's hard when you're putting in food, like you're trying to make good choices, and then you find out that like your meat is full of all kinds of hormones and whatever antibiotics and all the junk. And it's like, how do you even be healthy? How do you even have a good relationship with food when your food is junk?
It's really hard to navigate. And that's part of the many factors that play into that. So I'll give you a personal example. So when I was in college, I was about 70 pounds heavier than I am right now.
Wow.
And I lost that weight over time, over a few years. And now I'm at this stage where I'm not in the obese category, and I would consider myself much healthier. Even though I don't feel any happier, I just feel like I have a healthier physical body. But getting to that point, it meant a lot of like long-term skills were learned. But at the same time, I don't think I'm over it, because I still have this really high food drive, and I have a lot of what's called food noise in my head. So I'm constantly thinking about food. And even when it's presented in front of me, I have a lot of skills now, but I didn't used to have them, of like, this is how I'm going to manage it. This is how I'll work on the dosage or the kinds of foods I'll eat. And this is my profession, and it's still really hard for me. So I can only imagine how hard it is for people who might lose that weight and then gain it back, and kind of see themselves as like, wait, so did I had obesity and then I didn't, but like, is it still ongoing? And that's why I think it is kind of this ongoing state of something you have to work on, just like nutrition in general, because you're never really done thinking about food or dealing with eating in a healthy manner.
I think there's also a piece of like shame to it, or feeling like a failure when you're like, yeah, I did it. Even like for me, it was surgery, but I mean, it wasn't an easy surgery by any means. And then it's like, I spent all this money and I was really excited and I loved how I looked and I felt whatever, but again, not dealing with any of maybe the more traumatic parts of my life. It was still buried there. And then so as I slowly started to put that weight back on, there was a piece of like, okay, well, you've obviously failed. You didn't do it.
Then you have guilt.
Well, yeah, you have guilt because I wasted money and I wasted time in my body. And then I think, well, maybe it's, because I have this up and down relationship with food, it's messing my hormones up. And maybe that's what caused cancer. And it's like, there's a lot of thoughts that go on, and it's all like stems from food. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and just to like normalize that is what everyone I've ever worked with has dealt with mentally, which is this idea of shame and guilt. Because even though we all have similar goals of health, like we want to be, have a healthy body weight, eat in a healthy manner, we're all struggling to do it, a lot of the time. And then we just kind of say, well, it must be my fault. But it's clearly like there's this environmental piece where you just described it. A lot of the food we have access to is not very helpful. Now, luckily, we also live in a world where we do have access to good food, but it's kind of outnumbered a lot of the time. And so it's really hard, especially with like marketing efforts, to kind of stray away from it.
Yeah. You know what, like not saying that it's harder to eat healthy in Canada, like, but we don't have a summer season like you have. So you're able to get a lot of fresh stuff all year long, I would imagine.
But even a lot of the healthy products out there, it's not actually healthy if you look into the ingredients and stuff, right?
It makes it tougher for sure. And that's not just limited to Canada. That's definitely a US thing.
No,
also.
Europe is one of the better countries to live in.
Well, European food is a lot different in some places, not everywhere.
Not plastic and stuff like that.
So are you the type of person who believes that like our food is killing us? Like our food is, I don't know, that they don't care about the people who live in this world and it's all just about making money?
It's both. Yes. So, I mean, in my book, I dedicate a whole section to the fact that food companies, they're not necessarily these like evil entities that want to kill you. But guess what? Their incentive is financial gain. So they don't care about your health.
Well, they're businessmen.
So it's not, yeah, exactly. So it's like, in some ways, we do paint this picture of like, well, I'm never going to win because they're trying to kill me. Well, luckily, you still have options. but it's really
Mhm.
hard because they have all the money to like push against you, and they
Yeah.
have the best marketing
Makes
efforts in the
sense.
world. And yeah, they'll do everything they can to get you to eat the products that aren't as healthy.
Mhm.
And just
'Cause
to your
they're
point
cheaper
earlier,
too.
which is like the ingredients in a lot of these things are not very health promoting, and
Mhm.
people don't know how to navigate that.
Mhm.
So there's definitely the education aspect where people don't know it. But
Mhm.
then there's just simply the environmental piece, which is like, even if they knew it, the reward from eating some of these foods is so
Right.
high in our brains that it's like, how do you
Yes,
overcome that? How do you choose the salad when you can walk
totally.
and get a
Mhm.
much cheaper item 2 feet away?
I feel very unsatisfied eating a salad, if I'm quite honest. But like, there's something about eating, I don't know,
A
chicken
full meal.
wings or like, I don't know, something breaded that is like very comforting. Although, at the end of it, like, it's not like I feel better. I usually have a stomach ache after, but like
Mhm.
something in that moment mentally feels a heck of a lot better than eating a
Mhm.
salad,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
hard.
And so the to kind of put a positive spin on this now then, because it's like it's really easy to get lost in it's really hard and our food environment sucks, which it does. The
Yeah.
good news is we see people who succeed with this, and I see a lot of people do this all the time. And so we can
Mhm.
take some of these things within our food environment and say, well, guess what? The opposite of, some of these like high sugar cereals doesn't necessarily have to just be this bland salad. Like you can have this beautiful chicken
No.
salad with like dressing and toppings, and you can make it in a certain way that actually tastes really good. And so I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people know that third creative option. They're kind of
Right.
stuck in,
Mhm.
I'm either going to eat no food and fast and eat keto or something, or I'm
Yeah.
just going to give in and cave and eat all the foods off the shelf that I know are more rewarding but
Mhm.
much less health promoting. But luckily,
Mhm.
there's the third option. You can actually kind of blend the two together and get a really
That's fair.
satisfying
Mhm.
answer.
That is fair.
That's like what I like to do.
It totally, yeah. Ashley makes some beautiful meals for
Mhm.
sure. There is something about like every time I've tried to diet and it's like some sort of mixed greens and with like a lemon dressing and like a gross chicken breast and like plain steamed broccoli. And it's like, I do not like chicken breast. I do not like steamed broccoli. I do not like mixed green salad. And it's like, if I have to eat these things, I feel like I'm on a diet again. And it's
It's
taken all the joy out of it because I loved all those things forever. But then, like, as I became, an older, well, not older adult, but like where I am now, I associate it with dieting and I
But
really
everyone
dislike
does. We
it.
talked about that in our last podcast, how eating healthy is just a normal way of eating and that's what our body needs, but it's a diet or we're doing this, you know what I mean? Like it's completely different than
That's true.
it should just be we're just eating. We're eating normal. Healthy is normal eating. But it's so different now. It's always about you're dieting, you're doing this,
Hmm.
but that's the nutrients that our bodies actually need to live off
Yeah. Right.
and get better and
Yeah.
heal.
It's not a diet. It's actually just like what your body's
Exactly.
requiring.
I had a buddy of mine. He's like, "Oh, you're just you and your diets and your boiled chicken." I'm like, "I've never eaten boiled chicken in my life. Like, I don't think I'd ever want to eat boiled chicken."
You're
In
like,
my
first of
life.
all, it's sous vide.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, right.
But the perspective, like so many people have, like eating healthy is it's not how it actually is.
Yeah, and the language you're using too, which is like healthy, unhealthy, kind of
Mhm.
goes back to that black and white thing of like
Hmm.
the buzzwords we use around
Mhm.
dieting and just like
Mhm.
wellness culture. It kind of steers us away from healthy eating behaviors where it's like,
Yes.
why don't we just buy some healthy food, cook it at home, enjoy it, tell
Right.
ourselves when
Mhm.
we're time to done, prioritize these healthy behaviors. And if we could do those things, we wouldn't need to call things like healthy and unhealthy. We would just be able to say, this is what I ate today and it fueled my body,
Mhm.
and I'm good with that. But we don't live in a world that allows for that much
Mhm.
of the time.
So do you believe in like weight loss pills or stuff like that? Or do you just believe in balance
Ozempic.
like Ozempic? Or do you believe in balancing it just with the learning skills and eating
Nutrition.
nutrition and all that?
Yeah, so like we used to have weight loss pills, and those were
Mhm.
totally bunk. Like those don't do anything. Now
Right.
we have drugs that are very powerful,
Mhm.
and they certainly work for a lot of people. I have a lot of patients who are on them currently or who used to be on them, and
Hmm.
they
Mhm.
did quite a bit for their weight loss journey and health overall. So I've seen it work before,
But
but
does
I'm
it
very
cause failure?
cautious. Yeah, so I'm very cautious in working with them because they aren't a magic substitute for good nutrition
Mhm.
and good health.
Mhm.
Because even when you're on them, you have to develop the healthy eating skills. Because if you were to
Mhm.
just eat less of food that wasn't health promoting and
Mhm.
it made you lose weight, your body wouldn't be a lot healthier.
Mhm.
You'd be a little bit healthier, but you wouldn't
Mhm.
develop the skills. And quite
Exactly.
Right.
frankly, a lot of people who go on these weight loss meds, when they lose weight, they lose some fat, but they also lose quite a bit of muscle. That's just what happens
Mhm.
with all weight loss efforts. And so there's a lot that I have to do behind almost like the personal training aspect, which
Mhm.
is you need to lift some weights or you need to do some like resistance
Right.
training, some
Mhm.
exercise, some walking daily, because
Mhm.
your body is in a state where it's basically breaking down a lot and you need to tell it like I'm still functioning, I need to work hard.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
have to do that and you have to support it with quite a bit of protein, healthy carbs, and people don't know how to do
Yeah.
that. So my education, if someone is on Ozempic or tirzepatide or Mounjaro, like all these different weight loss meds,
Mhm.
is really just to support them in that journey. Because I
Mhm.
love the patient-centered approach of like, if you're going to take this, I'll help you do it healthily. And for a lot of people, they
Mhm.
say, I don't want to go on these meds ever. And then I'll say,
Mhm.
great, like I'll help you do it without that as well. Like I'll take either approach that people want, but I
Mhm.
can do that in a way that's healthiest for them
Mhm.
because they might take an approach that's different than how I would do it, but I can help them do it in a way that's actually going to be good for their
Better in
long.
the long run. Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. Yeah, I just keep hearing horror stories about the people I know who have gone on Ozempic or whatever. And I don't know, like recently I did a meeting at the menopause clinic here because that's one of the
Mhm.
side effects of chemo is throwing you into menopause. And so I was chatting with them and I said, "Look, like I've put on 30 pounds since chemo and I'm having a really hard time taking it off." And she was like, "Well, your doctor could put you on a semaglutide." And I was like,
Mm,
okay, what are my other options here?
Mhm.
Because
right.
like eating healthy, and exercising is like hasn't been working. So is that literally my option? But I mean,
Mhm.
it's not that it's not working, it's that I'm not consistent with it.
Mhm.
But it's just crazy to me that that was the doctor's first response was just get on this pill. Because I thought like I just went through cancer. Like I
See,
don't
and
need to
I
risk
asked, I
anything.
asked for Ozempic, they wouldn't give it to me because I gained so much weight because I had methane and hydrogen SIBO, and methane SIBO, you're constipated 24/7, and like there was
Mm,
I had like I think 11 days and I couldn't go to the washroom, and my stomach would swell with all the gas inside me.
But they
So
didn't give it to you because that wasn't weight that you would gain. That was
well, I had also
air
gained
and
30
poop.
pounds. So
Uh,
like but just because of the type of um the form of cancer I had before, they just didn't want to mess with anything. So they said no, they wouldn't put me on it. Not that I needed an easy way out. I just need my body to start working again. But for me, when you're this much heavier from what you were, you get depressed and you get sad and you're like, nothing's working.
yeah. Well,
So
so it's so interesting because you both had very different stories
mhm.
from that perspective, which is like doctors kind of their role is just like I have 10 minutes with you, I can offer you this one thing. So like you had that,
right.
and on the flip side you had someone who told you you couldn't
It's like
take
no.
this drug, right? And so it's
Uh,
very individualized. And to
Mhm.
the point earlier, I think you were about to say like, are there side effects to this? In about a quarter of cases we see side
mhm.
effects, and they can range
Mhm.
from, oh, I don't feel that great, to, oh, there's some actual like organ damage or something.
Mhm.
um, and
Yes.
so for 75% of people they won't have that, which is great.
Right.
But for the
Mhm.
25% that do have it, they do need to really think to themselves, is this going to be worth it for me? And for some
Mhm.
of them, if it's just some like nausea or something, that might be worth it. If for some of them, they're like, well, I don't want to risk some long-term health effect because I just
Right.
take this like cautious approach to my health, that's totally okay too. And for them individually, they might not want to do that and they can take other
Mhm.
approaches. And so there's a lot of hard ways to go about it as well. But, you know, it's up to them to decide.
For
Mhm.
sure. A girlfriend of mine went on it for about 6 months. She wasn't like a big girl or anything. I'm actually shocked her doctor gave it to her.
Mhm.
But yeah, she was on it for 6 months and then started getting really bad
Yeah.
gallbladder attacks. And she ended up losing her gallbladder. And her doctor said, yeah, it was because of the Ozempic. And she didn't even lose any weight. And I was like, dang, that doesn't seem worth it to me. Now I know there are a lot of success stories
Mhm.
on it.
There's both too, because like even some people who have taken it and then got off of it, they've gained their weight right back.
I think
Yeah,
that could
which
be
is what you
said
have
of
to learn.
any
Yeah.
any quick
Mhm.
fix, if you're not changing your mindset, your attitude with food, that relationship with food, if you're not implementing proper tools, you're
Mhm.
always going to gain that weight back.
Mhm.
And I had a majority of my stomach removed. I was left with
Mhm.
a stomach the size of a banana.
Hmm.
I gained it all back, because you
Interesting.
don't deal with
The
what
emotional
yeah
side?
well the emotional side and just that
connection?
healthy side of it.
Yeah.
And we also do live in a very like need a quick fix kind of world, because we're always on the go, like you said, bringing like buying groceries, making those meals at home, taking the time to sit and eat it. It doesn't happen very often. I can't remember the last time I sat at the table with my family for dinner, because we
Mm.
literally just don't have
Mhm.
time with kids and sports, and I have stuff going on, my husband has stuff going on. It's
Mhm.
like we don't have time. So quite often we're like, let's just grab something on the way. That's that mentality now,
Mhm.
because everyone's so busy.
Yeah. And so for you, do you think it's almost like you have to change your life in order to
Yeah.
like prioritize
Yes.
nutrition? Or do you
You see,
think
it's
that you
my
can
life.
almost within that?
That makes sense.
Yeah, like I do feel like I have to change it, and it's not just my life, because I was quite healthy before cancer, focusing more on like what I was eating and making those meals and stuff. But then my kids were picky, so they didn't want it, and then my
Mhm.
husband's
Right.
picky and he didn't want it, and then I was making 3 different meals, and
Mhm.
I got to the point, especially when I got sick,
Stressful.
but I was like, I do not care, you guys can eat
Yeah.
ramen noodles, I'm going to make my meal, and then I'm going to go lay down again.
Mhm.
Like it just got to that. And so now it's like, again, almost like a bit of a PTSD is exaggeration, but a bit of like negative feelings towards it when I look back on that time
Totally.
of making a nice meal for my family, sitting down and enjoying it. All it was is people complaining. And so like for me, I think part of that negativity towards nuclear family meal time is like because of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so now if we look at it from like the root cause perspective, you would have to peel all the way back to family dynamics and like
Mhm.
what does our culture teach about how we sit down for food, how we interact with our schedules on a daily basis. Like those are the things that are impacting our nutrition down the line. Like our subsequent consequences are, well, we don't have time for anything. So of course we grab the quick
Mhm.
fix. It's like, well,
Right.
why don't we have time? Well, we didn't make time. And that's just kind
Right.
of where our culture sits right now. And so we could make a whole widespread effort, or we could have these like communes of people that do
Mhm.
better, but it's not an easy answer. And unfortunately, a lot of people like to put in the quick fix, easy answer of like, well, just try the crazy diet. And it's like, unfortunately, we have to shift our whole culture, which is really hard.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Makes
I
sense.
really think that very few people find long-term success in the quick fad diet,
Mhm.
because it's just going to go back to the way it was,
Mhm.
because I think too, your body doesn't trust you when you're constantly yo-yoing.
Mhm.
Like when you're like, okay, I'm starving it today. And
It's
then
like
it's
a
like,
fight or flight with
and then
food.
like another day, it's like, no, we're nourishing it. These are really healthy foods. And then like another day, it's like only junk food or like only alcohol today. And like, I just think your body doesn't trust you. Your body wants to be well, but it doesn't trust you.
Mhm.
True. And that's why the number one health advice I give for people when it comes to nutrition is eat consistently and eat at
Mm.
consistent times. Because if you go one day eating breakfast at 7 a.m. and then the next day you eat at 10 a.m., or you skip 2 meals every day, and then the
Mhm.
next day you have like 5 meals, your body has no idea what to expect. So your
Right.
hunger and fullness cues, your hunger hormones,
Mhm.
and really just the response that you have from like the ancestral version of yourself is
Mhm.
I'm going to eat food and I'm going to go crazy over it, or I'm
Oh,
strict that you're supposed to have.
sorry, say
But I
that
don't know.
last part again. It cut out for just a quick second here. You said the ancestral part is, and then it cut out.
Basically, it's our bodies were wired to either get a lot of food or not have any food. So it's
Right.
saying to yourself, okay, you're not going to give me food or you're going to be inconsistent, then you're not going to get a good hunger response out of me. And so it's really
Right.
hard to manage food and have a healthy relationship if you're not being consistent with the timing every day and the amount of meals and those kind of habits.
Geez, like I'm feeling so motivated. Like I want to go and meal prep and eat my lunch at a certain time and eat my breakfast at a certain time. And I never do. I'm one of those like up and down. Maybe I ate it, maybe I don't. Maybe it's at 9 o'clock, maybe it's at 7 o'clock. It's just whatever goes. But I know that there is some merit to schedules and timelines and things. I know it's the same with sleeping as well. Okay.
Yeah. And
Implementing
I don't know.
things.
Have you guys read, did you ever read the book Atomic Habits?
Mm-mm.
It was like a
I think I
best-selling
might
book
have actually.
recently.
I know
So
exactly what you
his big thing is like we couldn't possibly rely on motivation to give us
mean.
like our nutrition and health habits and any other habit that we want to sustain. So we have to rely on these small things that we do every single day, which is why
Hmm.
meal prepping is so important because if you actually make some food ahead of time, you're left with that food the next day and it's like, okay, it's in front of me. I'm now going to
Yeah.
follow this because it's easier to see, it's more
Right.
accessible.
Mhm.
I don't have to think about it and be
Quicker.
motivated to eat
Yeah.
every meal perfectly. So you do have to kind of build in those habits
Mhm.
every day, and sometimes they're hard and they're just disciplines that you end up
Mhm.
doing, but they're better than motivation because you would lose motivation to do it over time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. Okay. Well, just quickly before we wrap up here, tell everybody about the book you wrote.
Oh yes. So it's called Nutrition Nonsense, and it deals with like all of the social psychological biases that just totally sabotage our eating habits.
Mhm.
So it's on Amazon. I think it's a really fun read because it kind of goes into a lot of the things we know about our food environment, which is like the
Mhm.
food companies are
Mhm.
not doing us a service and they're making it really hard to eat well. But it's
Mhm.
also talking a lot about like these certain biases we have towards food, which just a quick one is like the nocebo effect is the opposite of placebo effect, which is
Mm.
basically if you expect a food to have a negative response in your body, it's going to have one because you mentally are
Right.
Mhm.
expecting that.
Mhm.
And so there's so many food examples of that we have in our culture today where it's like, uh-oh, I don't want to eat the bread or the meat or
Mhm.
the eggs or
Right.
something because I'm expecting it to be bad because someone on social media
Mhm.
told me that. And then what
Mm.
happens is our body responds accordingly. So
Mhm.
there's so many other biases like that that are in the book that I think people could learn a lot from.
Mhm.
And it's funny that you say that because and probably the same for
Mhm.
you, when we both first got sick, the big thing surrounding cancer is that you can't eat meat. Meat causes cancer,
Mhm.
is the thought.
Yep.
And like, I also like, I'm such a meat eater.
Mhm.
I feel really good and nourished when I eat clean
Mhm.
meats, especially red meats.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you are a fan of like the blood type diet
Mhm.
type stuff, but like, I'm an O blood type. And so when I first got sick, I was like, okay, I have to go raw vegan right away. And I was juicing a ton and like I hurt. My stomach was in
Mhm.
pain all the time. My body physically like just did not know how to handle
Yeah, I didn't
eating
stop either.
raw veggies and all this
Mhm.
juice all the time. And I had brain fog. Like I had no
Mhm.
idea like I couldn't remember anything. And then as I started to say like, you know what, maybe that's the case, but let's like introduce clean, like pasture raised, organic,
Mhm.
non-hormonal foods into your diet in small doses and
Mhm.
see, like salmon, like nice salmon, like just including that in my mostly kind of raw
Mhm.
food, and what a difference it made. All of a sudden my stomach wasn't in so much pain. My brain
Mhm.
was functioning again. So
Mhm.
I think like, yeah, there is some merit to that. Meat can be inflammatory.
Mhm.
But I also don't think that every single person who's ever had cancer's body responds exactly that same way
Mhm.
to a raw
Right.
vegan diet. I don't. I think everyone is made
Yes.
up differently. Their genetics will respond very differently.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, to me, that was like one of those nutritional nonsense type things. It's like you don't have to be a raw vegan when you get cancer because both her and I ate meat through the
Mhm.
entire
I never
process,
stopped.
and our bodies
Mm-mm.
both responded very well to the
Mhm.
treatments that we were doing.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you were able to actually learn what you felt instead
Mhm.
of relying on like, oh, so someone told me this. It's
Yeah,
like,
there's a
well,
lot
they
of that.
didn't, yeah,
Mhm.
they're not in your journey. You have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Well, we say this
Exactly.
a lot on the
Oh,
show.
yeah.
Even if Ashley and I had the exact same cancer, same diagnoses,
Mhm.
our bodies are still going to respond differently because
Mhm.
we're two different human beings. So,
Mhm.
like, yeah, when people are like, oh, well, my mom did this and she was totally fine. You need to do this. It was like, well, cool. But
It's like we
like,
can pick things from people's
that's sort of
stories,
guess and
but
check
but it's
kind of
not.
stuff as well.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
You have to try it out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being on our show. Hold on, I'm backwards here. So point down here, Nutrition Advocate on
Go
Instagram.
the other way.
Do you have, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't. If I go down, it's this way. I got to point this way, which is opposite. But yeah, the Nutrition Advocate is your social media handle. What platforms are you on?
Instagram is my big one. So I
Okay.
post there. With two young kids, it's like that's pretty much the
Mhm.
main
We got
place
time
I
for that.
post.
I got it.
Mhm.
Exactly. I will have some more stuff coming out soon. So, but the
Amazing.
book and Instagram are my main ones.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, check Parker Nelson out at The
Mhm.
Nutrition Advocate on Instagram. Get his book, Nutrition Nonsense, on Amazon. Yeah, you're very smart. I like
Mhm.
people with knowledge like this who are also very kind when
Mhm.
they deliver it as well. So I appreciate you being here today and giving our listeners just something different than what we normally talk about.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I loved it.
Thank you.
Like, what are we, 3 for 3? It's like amazing.
I think all of them will be
Like,
because they hit different aspects.
Amazing people on our show. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was Parker Nelson. Really awesome. I love this piece on
Mhm.
healthy relationships with food. I think it's so important because like it is really black or white
Mhm.
with a lot of eating. So check out his stuff. Definitely his Instagram right
Mhm.
there. This way, if I'm pointing that way. And also check us out on
Mhm.
Two Girls Without
Without
Cancer
Cancer.
on all the places, all the social medias, all the streaming
Everywhere.
platforms. And we will see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.